Ever since shows like The Walking Dead sent zombies shambling forth into the annals of pop culture history. The living dead have been everywhere from TV commercials to musicals. But what are the origins of this mystical beast? Where did zombies come from? Let's unearth the facts for you. Gotta keep them tasty brains filled with knowledge. Technically speaking, a zombie is a fictitious undead creature that has come to be via the reanimation of a corpse. They're common antagonists in almost every form of media, from books to film to video games. The term itself derived from Haitian folklore. In Haiti, a zombie is made by reanimating a dead body using various methods, such as powders, poisons, incantations, and magic. The more modern depictions of zombies that we're familiar with today stray from those particular mystical tropes in favor of more science fiction-based methods, such as transmittable diseases, radiation, pathogens, parasites, and even scientific accidents. Since there's no actual way to create a zombie, per se, how they're brought back is up to the teller of the story or belief of an individual. The first known usage of the word zombie was written back in the year 1819 by a Brazilian poet named Robert Southey, who spelled the word Z-O-M-B-I. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word's origin is West African and compares it to the Congo word Zambi, meaning God, and Zumbi, meaning fetish. A 1903 Kimbundu to Portuguese dictionary defines the related word zumbi as soul, and later, Kimbundu Portuguese dictionary defines the word as being a spirit that is supposed to wander the earth to torment the living. The concept of zombies have been popularly associated with the voodoo religion, but the creatures are never mentioned in that particular faith's formal practices. No one really knows just how the contemporary zombies that we know today from films came to be called zombies. Director George A. Romero's 1968 film, Night of the Living Dead, is widely cited to be the main source of all current Living Dead products, but the film itself never referenced the undead as zombies. Instead, they were known as ghouls. Here's the kicker though. The word ghoul is actually derived from Arabic folklore, which describes them as demons and not the undead. Even though Romero used the term ghoul in his original Living Dead scripts, he later referred to them in interviews as zombies. The word zombie was first used by Romero in his script for his 1978 sequel to Night of the Living Dead, entitled Dawn of the Dead. According to Romero, it was the film critics that were influential in associating the term zombie to his undead antagonists, especially the French magazine Cahiers du Cinéma. Eventually, Romero adopted the term, even though he was of the mindset that zombies corresponded to the undead slaves of Haitian voodoo rituals that were depicted in White Zombie, starring horror legend Bela Lugosi. Zombies are widely featured in Haitian rural folklore as dead people who have been physically revived by the acts of a necromancer, a witch, or a sorcerer. A necromancy practitioner known as a bokor is usually opposed by a haungan, which translates to priest, and the mambo meaning of priestess of the official voodoo religion. Zombies will remain under the control of the bokor as their slave. Zombies under the spell of a bokor have no will of their own. Haitian traditions also include a ghostly type of zombie known as the zombie astral. They are made up of parts of the human soul. Bokars catch zombie astrals to enhance their spiritual power. Bokars can also capture a zombie astral and steal it inside of a specially decorated bottle to be sold to a client as a means to bring business success, luck, or even healing properties. Haitians believe that God will sooner or later come to reclaim the zombie soul. So, in essence, zombies are temporary spiritual entities. The belief in zombies and zombie traditions were brought to Haiti by enslaved Africans, and their experiences as what was known as the New World. It's commonly believed that the voodoo god Baron Samedi would gather souls from their graves and bring them to a heavenly afterlife in Africa. But if they had offended Samedi in some way, they would be sentenced to live as a zombie slave. It is also believed that zombies could be saved by feeding them salt. According to English professor Amy Willens, wrote that the modern concept of zombie was heavily influenced by Haitian slavery. Voodoo priests, or promoted slaves who had become slave drivers who worked on the plantations, would use the fear of zombification to scare slaves and dissuade them from committing suicide. It wasn't long before Haitian zombie phenomenon attracted widespread international attention, especially during the United States occupation of Haiti from the years 1915 to 1934. During this time, a number of case histories of purported zombies came to light. In 1929, author William Seabrook wrote the very first book on this subject, entitled The Magic Island. Seabrook wrote about Article 246 of the Haitian Criminal Code, which passed in the year 1864, saying that it was an official recognition of zombies. This very passage was used in promotional materials for the 1932 horror film White Zombie. The article read, "Also shall be qualified as attempted murder the employment which may be made by any person of substances which, without causing actual death, produce a lethargic coma more or less prolonged, if, after the administering of such substances, the person has been buried, the act shall be considered murder, no matter what result follows." In the year 1937, American author, anthropologist, and filmmaker Zora Neale Hurston was researching Haitian folklore when she encountered the strange case of a woman who appeared in a village. A local family claimed that the woman was one of their relatives. She was named Felicia Felix Mentor. There was just one problem. She had died and been buried at the age of 29 in the year 1907. Felicia Felix Mentor was examined by a doctor who, after taking x-rays, she didn't have the leg fracture that she was known to have suffered from. Fascinated, Hurston decided to pursue the rumors that affected victims were given a powerful psychoactive drug, which gave the victim the appearance of being dead. However, Hurston wasn't able to find anyone that was willing to offer any serious information. Hurston wrote, "What is more, if science ever gets to the bottom of voodoo in Haiti and Africa, it will be found that some important medical secrets, still unknown to medical science, give it its power, rather than gestures of ceremony." Many decades after Hurston's work, Harvard ethnobotanist Wade Davis presented a pharmacological case for zombies in his 1983 article that appeared in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Later on, his work was featured in two popular books. 1985's The Serpent and the Rainbow, which was later turned into a film by horror legend Wes Craven in 1988, and then again that same year in the book Passage of Darkness, The Ethnobiology of the Haitian Zombie. Davis journeyed to Haiti in the year 1982, and he concluded through his investigations that a living person could be turned into a zombie by administering two special powders into the system of a victim via their bloodstream. The first powder includes tetrodotoxin, or TTX for short. This is a powerful and frequently fatal neurotoxin that can be found in the flesh of a pufferfish. The second powder is made up of delirium drugs like datura, which are fittingly well known as devil's trumpets. When combined, these powders are believed to induce a death-like state. While in this weakened state, the will of the victim would be entirely controlled by the Bokor. Davis also popularized the tale of a man named Clervius Narcissi, who claimed to have fallen victim to this practice. Davis described the zombie-like state as being a death-like condition of suspended animation. Soon afterward, a victim would reawaken, usually after being buried, and be in a severely psychotic state. The psychosis induced by the drug and psychological trauma was hypothesized by Davis to reinforce culturally learned beliefs and to cause the individual to reconstruct their identity as that of a zombie, since they knew that they were dead and had no other role to play in the Haitian society. Society reinforced this belief, and it was hypothesized by Davis to confirm that the zombie individual to be in a zombie state. Such infected individuals were known to hang around in graveyards while exhibiting a trance-like behavior. Davis has made claims that have been heavily criticized, such as his suggestion that Haitian witch doctors can keep their zombies in a state of a pharmacologically induced trance for many years. TTX poisoning can exhibit a wide range of symptoms, everything from numbness and nausea to paralysis of the muscles of the diaphragm, unconsciousness, and even death. However, they do not include stiffened movements or a death-like trance. Psychologist Terence Hines maintains that the scientific community should dismiss tetrodotoxin as the cause of this state, and that Davis's assessment of the nature of the reports of Haitian zombies is viewed as overly credulous. A Scottish psychiatrist by the name of R.D. Lang once highlighted the link between cultural social expectations and compulsion in the context of mental illness, such as schizophrenia. Lang suggests that schizogenesis may be the reason for some of the psychological details of zombification. In particular, Lang contends that cases in which schizophrenia can manifest a catatonic state. Back in 1997, professor of anthropology and psychiatry Roland Littlewood published a study that supports a more social explanation of the zombie phenomenon in the medical journal known as The Lancet. Littlewood's social explanation sees people who are identified as zombies as a culture-bound syndrome. The particular cultural form he emphasizes is the adoption practiced in Haiti, which brings together the mentally ill and the homeless, with grieving families over the loss of a loved one. These families see them as their returned, lost family, as Littlewood summarized his findings during an article in Times Higher Education as follows. I came to the conclusion that although it is unlikely that there is a single explanation for all cases where zombies are recognized by locals in Haiti, the mistaken identification of a wandering mentally ill stranger by bereaved relatives is the most likely explanation in many cases. People with a chronic schizophrenic illness, brain damage, or learning disability are not uncommon in rural Haiti, and they would be particularly likely to be identified as zombies. Even though the famed book, Frankenstein, by Mary Shelley, isn't exactly a zombie novel, it is home to many of the 20th century ideas about zombies, especially that the resurrection of the dead is more of a scientific process than its mystical one. It also shows that the reanimated dead still rot and are far more violent than their living selves. Published in 1818, Frankenstein has its roots planted firmly in European folklore. Their tales of the vengeful dead also created the evolution of the modern concept of another famed creature, the vampire. During the 20s and early part of the 30s, American horror author Howard Phillips Lovecraft wrote multiple novellas that dealt with the undead theme in The Vault, The Outsider, and Cool Air. All featured tales of the undead, but it was his 1921 tale, Herbert West, Reanimator, that helped define zombies in popular culture. This series of short stories focused on Herbert West, a mad scientist who attempts to revive human corpses with, shall we say, mixed results. Specifically, the newly resurrected dead are primitive, uncontrollable, mostly mute, and insanely violent. Even though they're not referred to as zombies in his story, their portrayal laid the groundwork for the modern conception of zombies. In the early 50s, vengeful zombies were a staple in EC Comics horror. Titles like Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, and Weird Science. And George A. Romero himself would later cite them as an influence for his Living Dead. In the year 1954, Arthur Richard Matheson released one of his most popular novels, I Am Legend, and though it is primarily classified as a vampire story, it still had a powerful impact on the zombie genre thanks to Romero. The novel and its 1964 film adaptation, The Last Man on Earth, starring horror legend Vincent Price, told the story of a lone human survivor trying to stay alive amidst a world of vampires. Romero cited the book and the film as having a great influence on his 1968 low-budget classic, Night of the Living Dead. Romero's film proved to be more influential on the concept of zombies than any literary or cinematic work before it or after it. Of course, as time moved on, zombies, like everything else, evolved. One of the most popular evolutions of the living dead is that they can now run. Fast zombies are in stark contrast to Romero's classic slow, shambling zombies. Fast zombies are way more aggressive, and sometimes they're often thought to be more intelligent. The debut of fast-moving zombies came about during the 1990s in Japanese horror video games. In the year 1996, Capcom released their survival horror video game, Resident Evil, and that game featured zombie dogs who would run towards the player. Later that year, Sega released their popular arcade shooter, The House of the Dead, and it introduced running human zombies who would move ferociously toward the player. The running human zombies that were introduced in the House of the Dead video games inadvertently became the basis for the fast zombies that grew in popularity during the early 21st century, starting with films like 2002's 28 Days Later, the Resident Evil and House of Dead film adaptations, and the 2004 remake of George A. Romero's sequel to Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead remake. Zombies have been staple antagonists in movies since the 30s, beginning in 1932, with director Victor Halperin's White Zombie, starting one of the first horror icons ever, Bela Lugosi. Today, zombie films are released with increasingly regularity, with at least 55 films that were released in the year 2014 alone. Zombies aren't just for horror stories either. Voodoo-related zombie themes have also popped up in adventure and espionage-themed properties. One example is the original 1964 Johnny Quest series and James Bond movie and novel Live and Let Die. These projects feature Caribbean villains who claim to wield the voodoo power of zombification as a means to keep everyone afraid of them. Make no mistake though, the modern conception of the zombie owes itself almost entirely to George A. Romero's 1968 masterpiece, Night of the Living Dead. With his movies, Romero bred the zombie with the vampire, and what he got was the hybrid vigor of a ghoulish plague monster. This gave birth to an apocalyptic vision of monsters that have come to be known as Romero zombies. Beloved film critic Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times once admonished theater owners and parents who let kids to see the movie. "I don't think the younger kids really knew what hit them," complained Ebert. "They were used to going to the movies, sure, and they'd seen some horror movies before, sure, but this was something else." According to Ebert, the film affected the audience immediately. Ebert was quoted as stating the following: "The kids in the audience were stunned. There was almost complete silence. The movie had stopped being delightfully scary about halfway through and had become unexpectedly terrifying. There was a little girl across the aisle from me, maybe 9 years old, who was sitting very still in her seat and crying." Romero's reinvention of zombies is incredibly important in terms of the way that he used his antagonists. Romero used zombies as a vehicle to criticize real-world social ills such as government ineptitude, bioengineering, slavery, greed, and exploitation, while indulging our post-apocalyptic fantasies. Night was the first of what would be 6 films in Romero's Living Dead series. The first sequel, Dawn of the Dead, was released in the year 1978, followed by 1985's Day of the Dead, 2005's Land of the Dead, 2007's Diary of the Dead, and finally 2009's Survival of the Dead. Each of Romero's films introduced certain hero zombies who stood out from the pack. One such hero zombie was portrayed by horror personality and historian Steve Barton, who was quoted during a 2010 interview about why Romero's zombie movies have become and remain so popular. According to Barton, Romero's movies changed the game. These weren't monsters in the classic sense with fur, scales, or fangs. They weren't in remote, spooky castles. They were and are living right next door. The terror was now coming from within, a place in which you would normally feel extremely safe. These ghoulish things were our friends, our neighbors, and our families, and they were coming for us. If the person you love most came at you wanting to kill you, would you have what it takes to stop them? You may be able to do it physically, but what about mentally? Such a horrific occurrence would no doubt change you forever. Can you even think of anything scarier than that? I certainly can't. In several European countries, Romero's Dawn of the Dead was released under the title Zombie. Just months after it came out, Italian horror director Lucio Fulci released a quasi-sequel known as Zombie 2, and that spawned a franchise all on its own. When Zombie 2 came out in the United States, it was known simply as Zombie. Dawn of the Dead remained the most commercially successful zombie film for several decades, until the popularity of zombies gripped the world in the 2000s. According to author Kim Newman in the 2011 book Nightmare Movies, the zombie revival began in the Far East during the late 1990s. It gained momentum largely because of 2 Japanese zombie games released in 1996, Capcom's Resident Evil and Sega's House of the Dead. The success of these 2 zombie-themed games ignited a wave of Asian zombie flicks like 1998's Biozombie, 2 films in 1999, Wild Zero and Junk, then Versus in the year 2000, and a movie called Stacy in 2001. The reanimation of the undead's popularity eventually went global, thanks in no small part to Resident Evil and the House of the Dead, which were both adapted to films that achieved varying degrees of success and infamy. The turn of the millennium dovetailed neatly with a long-running string of undead box office successes that saw the zombie subgenre enjoying a resurgence. The Resident Evil movies, which were released during the years 2002 and 2016, the British films 2002's 28 Days Later and its 2007 sequel 28 Weeks Later, alongside 2004's Dawn of the Dead remake and the zombie comedy Shaun of the Dead, all went on to score some big box office dollars. The renewed interest sparked Romero's return to the world of living dead with his 2005 film, Land of the Dead. That's a lot of flesh eaters. Some might say a horde. The surprising success of the horror comedy Shaun of the Dead led to more successful zombie comedies during the late 2000s to early 2010s, like 2009's Zombieland. In the year 2013, the AMC series The Walking Dead brought the rotting villains home to the small screen, giving the cable channel the highest audience ratings in the United States for any show on broadcast or cable, with an average of 5.6 million viewers in the 18 to 49-year-old demographic. Also, in 2013, the film World War Z became one of the year's highest-grossing flicks and the highest-grossing zombie film of all time. Coinciding with all this, and starting from the mid-2000s on, a new type of zombie film has started shambling its way to popularity. One that found zombies being portrayed as far more human-like in behavior and appearance. These creatures held on to the personality traits that they had when they were among the living. They could even become buddies and sometimes even romantic partners for humans, instead of being just a threat to humanity. Some prime examples of human zombie romance properties include live-action movies Camille, Warm Bodies, Life After Beth, Nina Forever, Buying the Ex, a stop-motion animated movie Corpse Bride, a television series such as iZombie, In the Flesh, Babylon Fields, and Pushing Daisies. According to zombie scholar Scott Rogers, what we are seeing in Pushing Daisies, Warm Bodies, and iZombie is in many ways the same transformation of the zombies that we have witnessed with vampires since the 1931 movie Dracula, where Dracula was represented as essentially human, a significant departure from the monstrous representation in the 1922 film Nosferatu. Rogers also mentions that the accompanying visual transformation of the living dead has changed as well. More traditional zombies are disfigured and decomposing, and the romantic zombies show either little or no such traits. During the late 2010s, zombie films started down the declining road of popularity. In their place came a new breed of horror flicks, known for having elevated horror that include 2015's The Witch, 2016's Get Out, and 2018's A Quiet Place, and Hereditary. An exception to this decline was the 2017 low-budget Japanese zombie comedy, One Cut of the Dead, which went on to become a sleeper hit in Japan. The movie eventually went on to make box office history by earning over 1,000 times its budget. One Cut of the Dead has gone on to enjoy worldwide acclaim, with Rotten Tomatoes stating that it reanimates the moribund zombie genre with a refreshing blend of formal daring and clever satire. Zombies have also become key elements of apocalypse-themed movies. The standard subtext of the zombie apocalypse is that civilization and society as a whole is extremely vulnerable to whatever the unexpected holds for it. Most people, if they're desperate enough, prove to be unreliable, begging the question, who is the real monster, us or them? The running narrative of zombie apocalypse themes carries solid connections to the bumpy social landscape of the United States of America during the 1960s, when Night of the Living Dead provided an unexpected and wholly indirect commentary on the dangers of conformity. This theme was also explored in the 1954 novel The Body Snatchers, as well as the 1956 film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. A great deal of people believe that zombies give people the freedom to deal with their own anxieties regarding the end of the world. One film scholar suggested that more than any other monster, zombies are fully and literally apocalyptic. They signal the end of the world as we have known it. The star and co-writer of the 2004 smash hit zombie flick Shaun of the Dead, Simon Pegg, said that zombies were the most potent metaphorical monster. Pegg suggests that if vampires are representative of sex, then zombies are very much representative of death. Slow and steady in their approach, weak, clumsy, often absurd, the zombie relentlessly closes in, unstoppable, intractable. He expressed his dislike for depictions of fast zombies and argued that zombies should be slow-moving and inept, just as a healthy diet and exercise can delay death. Zombies are easy to avoid, but not forever. He also argued that this was essential to making them oddly sympathetic, to create tragic anti-heroes to be pitied, empathized with, even rooted for. The moment they appear angry or petulant, the second they emit furious velociraptor screeches, as opposed to the correct mournful moans of longing, they cease to possess any ambiguity. They are simply mean. The first contact with zombies are always very traumatic and dangerous. These contacts are known to cause panic, disbelief, and shock. Another possible reaction to the threat of the living dead is denial, and that could be the most dangerous of them all because it can hamper a survivor's ability to manage hostile encounters. During the 90s, zombie fiction became a distinct literary subgenre. With the publication of 1990's Book of the Dead and its 1992 follow-up, Still Dead, Book of the Dead 2. Both of these books were edited by horror authors Craig Spector and John Skip. Skip and Spector's books featured Romero-inspired stories from authors like Stephen King and have become influential in the horror genre and are considered by many to be the first true examples of zombie literature. Stephen King has written about zombies several times, including his 1990 short story Home Delivery and his 2006 novel Cell, concerning a struggling young artist on a trek from Boston to Maine in hopes of saving his family from a possible worldwide outbreak of zombie-like maniacs. Max Brooks's 2006 novel, World War Z, became a New York Times bestseller. Brooks had previously authored the Zombie Survival Guide in 2003, a zombie-themed parody of pop fiction survival guides. Brooks believes that zombies are popular because other monsters may threaten individual humans, but the living dead threaten the entire human race. Zombies are slate wipers. Seth Grahame-Smith's 2009 mashup novel Pride and Prejudice and Zombies combines the entire text of Jane Austen's 1832 opus Pride and Prejudice with a story about a zombie epidemic within the novel's British Regency period setting. As crazy as that sounds, it became wildly popular. This prompted Katie Hirschberger of St. Martin's Press to declare back in 2009 that, in the world of traditional horror, nothing is more popular right now than zombies. The living dead are here to stay. The decades of 2000 and 2010 were marked by a decidedly new type of zombie novel, in which zombies retain their humanity and become friends, or even romantic partners for humans. Critics largely attribute this trend to the influence of Stephenie Meyer's Twilight series. One of the most prominent examples is Generation Dead by Daniel Waters, featuring undead teenagers struggling for equality with a living and human protagonist falling in love with their leader. Other novels of this period involving human-zombie romantic relationships include Bone Song by John Meany, American Gods by Neil Gaiman, Midnight Tides by Stephen Erickson, and Amy Plum's Die For Me series. Much earlier examples dating back to the 1980s are Dragon on a Pedestal by Piers Anthony and Conan the Defiant by Steve Perry. There has been a growth in the number of zombie manga in the last decade, and in a list of 10 great zombie manga, Anime News Network's Jason Thompson placed I Am a Hero at number 1, considering it probably the greatest zombie manga ever. In second place was Living Corpse, and in third was Biomega, which he called the greatest science fiction virus zombie manga ever. During the late 2000s and early 2010s, there were several manga and anime series that humanized zombies by presenting them as protagonists or love interests, such as Sankaria, Undying Love, and Is This a Zombie? Back in the year 1996, 2 horror games brought the living dead to the next level of entertainment. Sega's The House of the Dead, and of course, Capcom's Resident Evil series. They ignited a worldwide craze for zombie games. Back in the year 2013, George Romero said that it was the video games Resident Evil and House of the Dead, more than anything else, that helped to popularize zombies in the early 21st century pop culture. These games even feature the first modern fast-running zombies, such as Resident Evil's running zombie dogs, and more specifically, House of the Dead's running human zombies. Now that the living dead could run, this new flavor quickly tore into the hearts of modern zombie fans. It wasn't long before zombies were running rampant through the worlds of video games. They were everywhere, from the survival horror genre to stealth to first-person shooters and, of course, in role-playing genres. Alongside Resident Evil and the House of the Dead, many huge franchises saw zombies digitally shambling and running through the minds of gamers everywhere. The living dead feasted on properties like Silent Hill, Dead Island, Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, World War II themed games, Zombie Army Trilogy, and Zombie Army 4, Plants vs. Zombies, Dying Light, The Last of Us, State of Decay, and even military shooters like Call of Duty enjoyed some good old-fashioned gut munching. A series of games has also been released based on the widely popular TV show The Walking Dead, which first aired in 2010. PopCap Games' Plants vs. Zombies, a humorous tower defense game, was an indie hit in 2009, featuring in several best of lists at the end of that year. the massive multiplayer online role-playing game Urban Dead, a free grid-based browser game where zombies and survivors fight for control of a ruined city, is one of the most popular games of its type. DayZ, a zombie-based survival horror mod for Arma 2, was responsible for over 300,000 unit sales of its parent game within 2 months of its release. Over a year later, the developers of the mod created a standalone version of the same game, which was in early access on Steam, and so far has sold 3 million copies since its release in December 2013. Romero would later opine that he believes that much of the 21st century obsessions with zombies can be traced more towards video games than films, noting that it was not until the 2009 film Zombieland that a zombie film was able to gross more than $100 million. Outside of video games, zombies frequently appear in trading card games, such as Magic: The Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card games, which even has a zombie type for its monsters, as well as its role-playing games such as Dungeons & Dragons, tabletop games such as Zombies, and Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game, and tabletop war games such as Warhammer, Fantasy, and 40K. The game Human vs. Zombies is a zombie-themed live-action game played on college campuses. Writing for Scientific American, Kyle Hill praised the 2013 game The Last of Us for the game's plausibility, which based its zombie enemies on a fictional strain of the cordyceps fungus, which has real-world parasitic properties. Despite plausibility, to date, there have been no documented cases of humans infected by cordyceps. Zombie video games have remained popular in the late 2010s, as seen with the commercial success of the Resident Evil 2 remake and Days Gone in 2019. This enduring popularity may be attributed in part to the fact that zombie enemies are not expected to exhibit significant levels of intelligence, making them relatively straightforward to the program. However, less pragmatic advantages, such as those related to storytelling and representation, are increasingly important. On May 18, 2011, the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, known as the CDC for short, published a graphic novel, Preparedness 101, Zombie Apocalypse, providing tips to survive a zombie invasion as a fun new way of teaching the importance of emergency preparedness. The CDC goes on to summarize cultural references to a zombie apocalypse. It uses these to underscore the value of stockpiling water, food, medical supplies, and other necessities in preparation for any and all potential disasters, be they hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, or hordes of zombies. On October 17, 2011, the Weather Channel in the United States published an article, How to Weather the Zombie Apocalypse, which included a fictional interview with the Director of Research at the CDD, the Center for Disease Development. Questions answered included, how does the temperature affect zombies' abilities? Do they run faster in warmer temperatures? Do they freeze if it gets too cold? In 2011, the U.S. government drafted Con Plan 8888-11, a training exercise detailing a strategy to defend against a zombie attack. Michael Jackson's 1983 music video Thriller, in which he dances with a troop of zombies, has been preserved as a cultural treasure by the Library of Congress National Film Registry. Many pop culture media have paid tribute to this video, such as the gathering of 14,000 university students dressed as zombies in Mexico City and 1,500 prisoners in orange jumpsuits recreating the zombie dance in a viral video. The Brooklyn hip-hop trio Flatbush Zombies incorporate many tropes from zombie fiction and play on the theme of zombie apocalypse in their music. They portray themselves as living dead, describing their use of psychedelics, such as LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, as having caused them to experience ego death and rebirth. The zombie also appears as a metaphor in protest songs, symbolizing mindless adherence to authority, particularly in law enforcement and the armed forces. Well-known examples include Fela Kuti's 1976 album Zombie and the Cranberries' 1994 single Zombie. Organized zombie walks have been staged, either as performance art or as part of protests that parody political extremism or apathy. A variation of the zombie walk is the zombie run. Here, participants do a 5K run wearing a belt with several flag lives. If the chasing zombies capture all the flags, the runner becomes infected. If he or she reaches the finish line, which may involve wide detours ahead of the zombies, then the participant is a survivor. In either case, an appropriate participation medal is awarded. Researchers have used theoretical zombie infections to test epidemiology modeling. One study found that all humans end up turned or dead. This is because the main epidemiological risk of zombies, besides the difficulties of neutralizing them, is that their population just keeps increasing. Generations of humans merely surviving still have a tendency to feed zombie populations, resulting in gross outnumbering. The researchers explain that their methods of modeling may be applicable to the spread of political views or diseases with dormant infection. Adam Chodorow of the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University investigated the estate and income tax implications of a zombie apocalypse under United States federal and state tax codes. Neuroscientists Bradley Wojtek and Timothy Versteinen have built a side career in extrapolating how ideas in neuroscience would theoretically apply to zombie brains. Their work has been featured in Forbes, New York Magazine, and other publications. One thing's for certain, there will be no cure for the zombie epidemic. The shambling creatures, whether they be slow or fast, show no signs of dying out completely. And that just goes to show you what George A. Romero always knew. You cannot keep a good ghoul down.